Once more, it's time for our oral history program on Marshall County. I'm Ray Mofield, and our guest today is James Hurley. Now, he often goes by the name of Buck to many of his friends, so we'll introduce him that way. Thanks for coming by.
Ray, I'm glad to come over and visit with you and talk with you about whatever subjects we find of mutual interest to us and your listeners.
Well, I think where we're sitting is some land that, did you buy this, or was this the old Hurley farm?
No, I bought this from Joe Clark. It was the old, what they used to call the old Hunt farm, and I bought it from Joe and then developed it.
And now Marywood Drive is one of the, well, I suppose better locations in Benton, and one of the newer at least. And it's delightful. My wife really likes out here, and I think all of our neighbors do too. And of course, you're sort of living in the area yourself, aren't you?
Yes, I'm living over on what we call the front of Marywood, which was the first part that I developed, and I built the first house built in Marywood, and built it 27 years ago this year, and it has grown. In the meantime, it's grown to what you see now and know now as Marywood, south, east, west, and whatever, and I think there are probably about 60 or 65 homes out here.
Mm-hmm. Now, that is 27 years ago. Well, how long ago was it that you came into the world? Was it in Marshall County?
I came into Marshall County come the 28th day of this month, which is right away, next week. I was born on what they call the old George DeHaven farm down in North Marshall County, down near Calvert City. And the George DeHaven farm is better known now as the plant site for Penwalt Company.
Mm-hmm. When I first knew you, I guess I was about a freshman, sophomore in high school, and you played basketball. Was that at Calvert City?
I began playing basketball at Calvert City when I was just a youngster, and played on two teams that went to the state tournament to represent the first region in 1934.
Was Eltis Henson the coach of that?
No, Ernest Pfizer.
Ernest Pfizer.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay. I got a little mixed up there. Well, we had some great basketball teams, even though there were 8 of them in those days. There were still some tremendous players and great teams as well as individual players. Of course, everybody always comes back and says, well, there was Joe Fulks.
Yeah, there was. Joe probably was the greatest that ever came out of this area down here. However, back at that time when I was playing ball and as a youngster, there were some super teams, beginning with, of course, this was before I started playing, but I was still spectating. Heath, you know, had the state championship team in 28. I guess they were the first ones to go from here, from this region, and they won the state tournament. And in 1933, Birmingham went. They had a great team when McCoy Terry played.
Oh, that's right. They had Robert Goheen and was it Sanders Watkins on that club, I believe?
Yeah, and a fellow I see quite often now here in town, Provine, was the center on that team. And then, of course, Wilford Baker played on it. Wilford died last year, but he was on that great team. That was in 33, and then we came along 34 and 35, and then Sharp in 38, and
took it all.
Yeah, North Marshall and whatever. Of course, we didn't win the state tournament, but we represented our region anyway.
Yeah, well, in 43, Benton, of course, they, you know, the war was going on, and they reduced the state. Didn't have a Sweet 16, but Benton won this sectional, they called it. And 4 teams went to the state, and they were, that is Joe Holland's great year, and he played for Adolph Rupp. The 41 Hardin Club lost only 1 game that whole year, and that is to the state champion. Unfortunately, it was by 1 point in the semifinals.
Hardin had a real good team back there.
Paget,
41,
Trimble,
42,
the
yeah.
Thompsons, and Elkins, and Billy Irvin, and
Bird Dog Miller.
yeah, there's quite a group of them.
Yeah.
Well, before we get clear away from it, who was your dad?
My dad is Harry Hurley, and everybody in Marshall County knows him. He's been around 94 years come November.
Isn't that remarkable?
That's remarkable. He's still well and,
Yeah.
and able to get around.
Does he still sell some real estate?
Well, not really. He goes up there to the office, but he usually goes up there just to say good morning and how are you this morning and read the paper a little and see everybody and then go back home. He has customers who has done business with him since the 1950s on real estate that still call on him once in a while, but he really doesn't get into it very much because he doesn't get around very well, and he's hard-hearing, and he just usually tells his boy, Pat, well, you take care of it, and
Yeah.
so that's how that's handled.
Yeah. Well, that's fine. Now, your mother was...
My mother was a miller. She was the daughter of Alva and Addie Miller, and they had a big family. There were about a half a dozen girls and 4 boys, and they were living on the north side of the county and living down in that area where the plants are now. My first recollections of families and names and school and basketball and whatever came from the north side around Calvert City.
Does it seem odd to you to look out there now and here's, B.F. Goodrich or whatever it happens to be, where you played as a boy?
Yeah, I associate those places, Ray, with some of my old memories of families living there in some of those places, like the Fowlers, the Millers, the Cans, the Strattons, the Stories, and people like that. The Courses. First school I ever went to was Courses School, which was down there right near where a GAF plant sits now. Originally it was called the Canada School, and it was located up in the woods there about 2 miles farther, which is where my dad first went to school, and where his first teacher and one of the early teachers in the county was Brother John Faust, Uncle John Faust. If you remember him, he was one of the early pioneer teachers here in the county, and he eventually went up to and was superintendent of the Owensboro school system for about 40 years before he retired, John Faust.
You know, we had a lot of famous school people in this county.
We did.
Although it's a small county, in those days a rather poor county. But we one time had a fellow named Peters who became state superintendent.
I knew Mr. Peters because he married the sister, I believe. He married one of the Solomon girls, and James Merlin Solomon was a center on our team that went to the state. And when we went to the state, we stayed with Mr. Peters in Frankfort overnight while we were there in Lexington. And I remember Mr. Peters and knew him. And of course, you think of fellows too, like who were principals down there at Calvert City. You think of Mr. Homer Ford, H.W.'s father, and then
he lived to be up
94. He lived to be
94.
94. He just died, a couple of years ago. And then Mr. Chumler, Roy Chumler. He was a.
Now, was he kin to William Wesley Chumler? He was a coach at Hardin one year.
I'm not sure. I think he was, but I'm not sure. Of course,
family.
he was older than William Wesley and older than that bunch. I don't know whether you knew him or remember him or not. He had one arm. He was a one-armed fella, but he was a real outstanding school principal. And I can remember him from my first school days. He was one of my principals, and Mr. Homer Ford was. And I think it was from those beginnings and being associated with people like that and being associated with little schools, good little country schools like that. I never had any problem with schools. I never had any trouble with schools. I always liked my academic work, even though I played ball. I loved my academic work, And I think it's from those early beginnings that I inherited a kind of a interest in and a tie to the school community. And even in the 60s, after I had built out here and lived out here, why, I was interested in serving on the school board at a time when I was asked to serve on the school board if I would run and get elected and serve on the school board during the time of this consolidation of our high schools in the county. And that's, well, I'd consider that one of the highlights of my professional career, is to serve 10 or 12 years that I did on the Marshall County School Board during the days of consolidation, because I've always been interested in it and worked toward it, and I thought it would always be a plus for us, and I believe it has been a plus for us here in this county.
You know, we were talking to Dick Farrell now, who used to be head of the music department in Murray State, and we were at Rotary yesterday, about how in the days when Murray State was a small school, now you're talking about little one-room schools, and the same thing held there, but you did what you did with the student body you had, and everybody did everything. We played basketball, baseball. We didn't have football, but we put on plays, and we'd get out a little newspaper once in a while, and everybody always graduated. And we were talking about back when I was in school at Murray, John Paget graduated, and it works now in Frankfurt, and you graduated, and Homer Solomon graduated, and Carl Johnson, and everybody in that generation. You went to school and you expected to graduate. What brought it up was an item in the paper early in the week which said, I believe, that Moorhead had not graduated a single basketball player in the last 11 years. Now that's a shame.
It is. It really is, because and that may be a new trend, though, from what I read. That may be a new trend, that athletes end up playing out their eligibility, but they don't end up graduating, especially in basketball and football, and that is too bad. Now, a lot of them go back to school and get their degree later, which they should, but it's unfortunate because...
You know, for the handful of them that actually get to play pro ball and make, of course, the ones that make $1 million, well, naturally, you're not sorry for them. They accomplish a lot in the way of monetary gain, far more than the rest of us do. Nevertheless, for the vast majority of those players, I think, well, we're taking advantage of them and misleading them or something or other. I just don't like it.
Well, I don't like it either, because even though I was an athlete, and I've always been proud of the fact that I was able to compete in athletics, I've always appreciated more and placed more emphasis upon academics in school than I did on athletics.
Well, you've shown that in a good many ways. Now, let's see. We got you over to what was Canada School, and they changed the name to Corsi. Did you finish 8th grade there?
No, most of my elementary and secondary schooling was at Calvert City, because we moved to Calvert.
You went on then and finished your
high school
there,
yeah.
And later you went to Murray State, I know, and I know you gave a wonderful service as alumni president, and I was proud of you and for you and so on, and your picture came out in full color on the cover of the alumnus. That was another Marshall County and made good as far as I was concerned.
Well, Marshall County has, you know from your exposure to the university and your connection with it, Marshall County has been a real supporter of Murray State University down through the years, not only in sending students and supporting Murray, but in supporting the Alumni Association after we graduate, because there's been many people active in alumni affairs, including serving on the general council of the Alumni Association and also serving as officers, because there's been several fellows here, including yourself, and going on back, and even since, who have been president of the Alumni Association.
I didn't
in Marshall
prepare
County.
I didn't prepare, and we're just ad-libbing. But as you say, I was a president for 2 terms. But now I can think right offhand, and you help me now. We're probably going to omit somebody big, but there was Mike Peake was president, and George Long was president,
Mm-hmm.
that I can think of just fairly recently.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Besides yourself,
Uh,
there may
Well,
may very well have been several others. But
you called names that I would have called right off because they're fresh on our mind. I know I had it called, all of us who were at the alumni banquet had it called to our attention that you were alumni president back so many years ago, because
51 was my
Yeah.
first term, and then
Right.
51, 52 was the second. And I guess we could count this because I think when J. Matt Sparkman was president of the alumni, he was then teaching
Mhm.
at Benton.
Right.
So
Well, another fellow I think of over there who supported the university for a good many years, and in the teaching part and academic part, was Tom Hogenkamp, and he used to teach school here at
Right.
Benton High School.
right, he taught at Benton.
Yeah.
And
Uh-huh.
he was telling me that just the other day. In fact, I believe last Saturday they had a reunion, or
right.
maybe the week before. And he was telling me that he was coming, and Helen,
Mhm.
his wife, of course, who was a graduate of Hardin High School.
I can remember even this going way back as far as Marshall County students supporting the university over there at Murray. I remember ball players going over there, many of them, and supporting the university, but I also remember a lot of students, and I especially remember a real good debating team academically that went over there.
Well,
Marshall County. You and
Rayburn
Watkins and Marvin,
that, yeah.
did Marvin Prince go to Murray?
Marvin
He
Prince
did-
went to
yeah.
Murray. He sure
Well,
did. Yeah.
Okay. I remember you fellas when y'all were super debaters. Well,
There was at one time, I don't know where he originally came from or where he is now. You may have some line on him, but I can recall going to debates at Murray back when I was somewhere in my high school career. The coach took us to hear the great debate team of Murray State, and they had Hazel Bob Miller and a guy from Murray named Dewey Jones, who was a Baptist preacher,
Yeah.
was on that team, and they debated Oxford University from England. You
Mhm.
know, they took on first-class opponents.
I remember that. In fact, I think I may have heard some of that,
Uh-huh.
because I've known Bob Miller all my life, and I've known Dewey Jones.
Is he
Well,
still around this part of the world? Or?
I don't know exactly where he is, but he's still around.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, did he not used to be a minister here in Benton?
Oh,
First
yeah.
Baptist
yeah.
Church?
He was at
Yeah.
First Baptist Church.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I've known him ever since then.
Oh, he was a handsome-looking fellow. And I remember he wore a black suit,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
thought, boy, I'd like to look like that sometime.
Now you're from Hardin, Ray, and I remember a few people from Hardin all my life ever since I've been grown. Like
Let's see, Ed Kello was probably around when you were there.
Ed was a good friend of mine. He went to school when I did. David Booker was another good friend of mine.
Yeah, made him an MD.
Yeah, right. And then of course I've always known the Darnolds that come out around there, Joe and Clay and
you talk about
and
ball
really-
players.
Oh, they were super.
They really were.
One of the best baseball teams I remember seeing and watching around here was the team that they played on. It was a Benton independent team back then.
Okay, now you played basketball at Murray State also.
Right. I played there during the time when Murray had.
Carlisle Cutchin was the coach.
Yeah, and that team that I played on, although I wasn't a starter, I was kind of a six-man type. It was a real good team, and they set records during 36, 37, and 38 that have not been broken. and they still stand as records, percentage-wise, and
Mm-hmm.
number of wins, and number of losses, and number of consecutive wins at home and on the road, and the most home victories of any players that played on any squads. Players like Burdette and McKeel,
Uh-huh.
they never lost a home game. They played their whole college career, never lost a home game at the university. Now that's, I doubt if there's anybody that.
No, I don't believe
record besides
I
them.
don't think we've even tied that record, much
No.
less you couldn't break it, could you?
No.
You might tie it,
uh,
but you couldn't break it.
Murray's had some great teams down through the years, as you know.
Oh, they have.
But that team back in the mid-30s there set some records that have not been broken since.
Okay, now we've got you graduated from college. Now, World War II was sort of looming in the background when you finished, wasn't it? And did you have to go in service?
Yeah, I graduated in 39, and I went in the service in 41, and I spent 3 years
Mm-hmm.
in the service.
Were you in Europe or the Pacific?
I spent most of my time in Europe. I only spent 1 year in training here in the U.S., and then I spent the rest of my career overseas and spent it all in the European theater.
Now, your wife, I understand, has fixed up a little unit here, and it shows some decorations that James E. Hurley won in World War II, and that's beautifully framed. You've got a marvelous wife who obviously is proud of you and your war record. What are those things, Buck?
Well, let me say, since you mentioned my wife, let me say first, before I address that I married a girl by the name of Geneva Bruce. She was not a Kentucky girl. She was an Arkansas girl whose family came in here to Benton in 1950. Her father went to work down when they were building the atomic energy plant.
Mm-hmm.
And I met her through our church down here. She went where I went, and we were married in 1952. And her name was Geneva Bruce, and she came from over around Blytheville.
Mm-hmm.
And she's a transplanted Arkansan, but she's always been happy here in West Kentucky.
Now, some of those great basketball players at Murray came from Arkansas. The Mac, Big Mac and Little Mac. Now,
Yeah,
what was their name?
McKeel.
McKeel. Yeah.
Uh-huh. They were good ones. Well, the awards that I won during the service, rather than try to tell you about them, I just brought that what I call a Christmas gift that my wife had fixed up. She got the medals out and the awards out, and got them put under cover and protected, and I had always just stored them in.
Well, let's see. There are, 4 of them there? Now, could you name what they are?
The major ones are the Silver Star is the major one, and then I won 2 Bronze Stars, or 1 Bronze Star, and then a cluster later is the same as winning 2 Bronze Stars. Then I was awarded a Bronze Arrowhead Invasion for being in on the invasion of Normandy, and then I was given 5 major campaign stars for participating in 5 major campaigns over there in the European theater. So those were the major awards that I won, and I have them now where I can hang them up on the wall, and they're protected, and I'm proud of. That's another thing I'm proud of is my military service, because it was a major part of my life, even though it was not long in years, 4 years, it was a major part of my life.
I wish we had a time to go through all of the article here that John McDonnell wrote about you in the Murray State Alumnus. That illustrates it all, but unfortunately we only have a half an hour, and time's getting away in a hurry. But I do, while I'm thinking about the Murray State thing, and after that you remind me to bring up your children. But one great thing you did was to convince an uncle of yours who became a pretty wealthy man, as I understand it, in Michigan, who was, I think, unmarried and left his fortune to Murray State as the Hurley endowment for scholarships and so on.
Well, he left a part of his, what I would call his corporate estate to Murray. He left $250,000 back in 1973.
And that's the biggest gift Murray had ever received.
Yeah, at that time it was. And oddly enough, he had never been on the campus at Murray and never seen Murray State, but he only knew about Murray State through me.
Mm-hmm.
And I had talked to him about leaving a part of his estate to permanent scholarship programs that would go on and on and on, helping youth, and tie it to Marshall County, and that's what we did. Of course, he left some of his estate to other institutions too, but Murray got $250,000 out of it, and it helped us at that particular time. It helped us in our scholarship program at Murray so very much.
And it's still helping, of course, and will permanently.
Yeah, there's 3 or 4 students every year from Marshall County that get scholarships over there to the university from that, and the scholarship program is a big part of, is the most important part of my activity with the Alumni Association down through the years, is the scholarship program, and that's another part.
Now, I don't want to forget, do you have any children?
I have a daughter named Carolyn, and she graduated from Murray in 1975. She married a Marshall County boy, Dennis Owens, Jim Owens' boy. Jim Owens was a center on that Brewers team that won the state tournament back there in 1948 or 49. And Dennis is a doctor in Paducah. Carolyn and Dennis live in Paducah. They have one child, a daughter. I have a granddaughter. It's the only grandchild we have. And with them living in Paducah and us in Benton, it makes it pretty convenient to see the granddaughter and to see them pretty often.
Oh, that's right. And life's too short to miss all the opportunities you have.
That may be one of the biggest sideline avocation things I have right now, is visiting with my granddaughter and having my granddaughter with me and my wife out here in Marywood. She likes Marywood. It suits her just about as well as where she lives down in Paducah. She knows a lot of the people in Marywood. She knows all the dogs in Marywood. Because we go walking through Marywood a lot, and she knows the dogs by their names. I
guess everybody knows Richard Lewis's dog.
Yeah, Wally. Wally's one of her biggest buddies. 'Cause he goes with us when we're walking, and he goes back home with us, and he is a real nice, friendly dog, and she really likes him.
Well, we've got about a minute and a half left. Do you have any special story that you'd like to tell? Do you think of anything? I don't believe we mentioned any of your brothers and sisters, but now in the same class with me at Murray was a fellow named Herbert Hurley.
Herbert's my brother, and well, there's been some Hurleys from my family graduate from Murray, Ray, every decade since the 30s on through the 80s. And when we've got them lined up for the 90s and the 2000s. Now, of course, I know tradition doesn't sell too much anymore for recruiting, and it doesn't have that much clout. But you and I, from the old school, we still believe in tradition, and it's important to me that families keep going to Murray. And while everything these days is pretty much on a standalone basis, I still got to hang my hat a little bit on tradition and custom.
Yeah, well, we certainly thank you. It's a wonderful story, the Hurley story, and I think you've told it real well, and I appreciate it much.
Well, I would say in closing that I'm proud that I was born where I was born, when I was born. I'm proud to have been a Marshall Countian, and I'm proud of the school activities and the military, and having worked my lifetime for the most part in Marshall County. I wouldn't have done it any other way, I don't think.
That is a marvelous note on which to close. I'm Ray Mofield, and you've been listening to James E. Buck Hurley, who lives here in Benton. Well, I don't know if it's on Marywood or the Mayfield Highway, or it's Kaywood, I guess. And we've appreciated his coming. We return you now to our studio in Benton.